Hi, and welcome to this video. This video is actually a result of an Instagram direct message conversation. So somebody reached out to me on Instagram through my direct messages and asked me if I would be open to collaborating on YouTube. And I actually have never done that before on this channel. And so I asked her what that looked like. I literally asked her, so what does that look like? That sounds fun. And she responded to me, and her idea was that we would pick a reference photo and each of us would paint or draw or whatever it is, interpret it in our own way. And I loved that idea. It sounded really fun. And so I agreed. And Rose Lynn Draws is the person who reached out to me, and she has her own YouTube channel. So I will make sure to link it because you'll have to go over there and watch her version of this same reference photo. So her version of how she's going to paint this reference photo. And so I just want to also, before I get into talking about the process of painting, which I would like to do, so I can share a little bit about what was going on in my brain when I was painting this, because I think that's really interesting part of watching somebody create something. But before I do that, I want to just say that this reference photo that we're using is not royalty free, and that is something that I am really careful about doing. So I always make sure that if I'm going to be drawing something or painting from a photo, that the photo is royalty free and it's free for artists to use, to interpret, and then to go on and possibly sell prints or sell their original and basically create revenue from the art that they're creating using that photo. And so because this isn't a reference photo, that's royalty free, I won't be selling this painting and I won't be making it into prints or anything like that. So this is literally just a personal project for practice, for fun, and for this collaboration that we're doing on YouTube. And so the next thing is I want to give full credit to the photographer, and I also want to just give you a little bit of background about what this photo is because I think it's interesting. So this photo was actually provided and suggested as an option from Rose Lynn Draws, and I picked it, or I picked this one out of the 3 or 4 that she sent because I gravitated towards the architecture that's in this photograph, and that's because I have a background in architecture as an architect and worked for 13 years. So obviously I'm going to gravitate towards this photo, besides the fact that it's just composed really beautifully and I love the colors and the shadows in this image. So this photograph was taken by a photographer named Andres Gallardo, and I will link to this gallery in the description so that you can go and check out the photographs or the other photographs of this project that he took. And so this project is called La Muralla Roja. That's the name of this building, and translated into English is the Red Wall. And it's actually a postmodern apartment complex in Calpe, Spain, that was designed by architect Ricardo Bofill. And it was built back in 1968, actually. And then I just want to read off of Andres Gallardo's website a description about the project. So La Muralla Roja by Ricardo Bofill is certainly a paradise for photographers. Located in Calpe, Spain, the building makes clear references to the Arab Mediterranean culture. Formed like a fortress, the complex emerges from the cliffs it stands on. Various tones of red paint cover the exterior facade, accentuating the contrast with the landscape. Stairs and circulation surfaces, on the other hand, are treated with different tones of blue, ranging from sky blue to indigo and even violet. Depending on the weather, the intention is to contrast with the sky or create visual continuity with it. And so I love that little description, and it's interesting because when I went to look at this photo and then do the color testing to make sure I kind of knew how I was going to mix the colors for this this painting, I noticed that there were a couple of small steps peeking through, and then you'll see like there's a part of the building in the background kind of in the distance, and it looked bluish purple to me, and I wasn't sure if it was the photograph, but it turns out that I think the actual building does have these tones of blues and violets, and so I wasn't wrong when I was mixing the colors. And I came back and I read this description And I was pleasantly surprised. And so basically, I guess I'll just get into the thoughts behind what I thought when I was painting this painting. So, what I'm doing here is I decided, and if you watch the last video I did, which I'll link below also, or I'll link in the video, is that I was using hot press paper and rough paper in the last video, and I decided I wanted to try hot press paper again. I have to say I didn't love it. I have a preference. I definitely like the more textured papers, but I wanted to give hot press another try just as an experiment. And so that's what I did for this one. So again, I sketched first and then I drew the lines in ink. It's waterproof ink. It has to be when you're doing watercolors. And then I painted over it. And I have to say that even after this experience, I'm not sure if I'm sold on hot press paper for myself personally. And that's because of the way that it dries. And number one, it dries really fast. And number two, you can see the brush marks as it dries because there aren't a lot of those like valleys and crevices that are in textured paper because this surface is completely smooth, you see all of the brush strokes. So if I stroke and then I lift and there's a puddle, that puddle is much more apparent when it dries than if I'm using a cold press or rough watercolor paper. So basically, I still enjoy painting on it. Obviously, it's still fun and the colors are really vibrant because it's hot press watercolor paper. And so that's the one thing is the colors are vibrant, but I just don't know if I like the way that the strokes come out. And it's also really hard to get dry brush texture. I got a little bit of it here in this painting, but it's just not the same as rough or cold press textured paper. But that being said, I was actually really surprised at how I was able to draw the perspective in this image. I have to say, if there's one thing that came out that I was a little bit surprised about was I didn't have to like fidget a lot with the perspective, which is usually something that I struggle with, especially when there's such harsh angles. So there's a lot of different angles in this photo, and it's obviously not perfect, but I was pleasantly surprised at how it turned out. And I'd like to think maybe that it's because I had done a little bit more architectural sketching during Inktober, so I'm a little bit warmed up from that, and maybe it just came out a little bit easier. But also because the perspectives here are pretty clear cut. Like the angles are pretty strong, and so there's not those kind of slight angles that could throw you off usually in architectural or very perspective heavy sketches. And so that's one thing that I was happy with. And then I'll have to share something I'm not happy with, and I wasn't quite happy with the contrast of the colors. So at the end of the video, you can see that I kind of come back and I try to layer, and I never really layer. I'm not a big layering person when it comes to watercolors. I don't really like to wait in between and like wait for the first layer to dry and then come back and then paint over top of it. I like to paint it kind of, all at once. I mean, obviously there's still layering, but I'm not a big layering person. Or glazing is another term that is used for building up layers of watercolor paper and waiting for the paint to dry in between. But that being said, hot press paper is really good for that. Actually, all the papers are good for it because it can handle the water, but hot press especially because it dries so fast. So there isn't a long waiting time in between. Granted, I had to take a break in between because I thought I was done and then I wasn't at the end so the paint had time to dry. So basically I stepped back after I was done and I looked at it and I didn't think there was enough contrast, because if you look at the reference photo, there's just a lot of contrast between the shadow and then the parts that are in light, and they're just different tones of red. And I thought that it comes across so beautifully in the photograph, but I don't know if I was actually able to capture it that well in the painting. And so I tried. I came back and I did another layer of the darker shadow to see if I could make it pop a little bit more. And then it was okay. I basically left it as is because I didn't want to end up overworking the painting. But otherwise, I just left it like that. And I also made a conscious decision not to paint the sky. So the sky in the reference photo is blue, but I intentionally left it the way it was because I didn't want to frame off the top of this painting. So if I had added a blue sky, I would probably have squared it off, so then the image would be a square, except now the sky kind of bleeds. It kind of has no border, and so I intentionally did that. I don't know why, just because I think I liked that look. And sometimes I am afraid of adding too much, and so I felt like if I added the sky, it might have been, I don't know, maybe just too completed, and I sort of like to leave a little bit open. And that's just been something I've been trying to do starting with Inktober. If you go back and you watch the Inktober sketch tour, you'll see like a lot of the things I've left white when I could have painted them in. And so it's a nice way for me to explore this style, and I've been having fun with it. So basically that's why I didn't paint the sky. And so I had a lot of fun doing this project and at the time of my recording this video, I don't actually know what Rose Lynn Draws, what her painting looks like. And so I'm excited to go and watch hers when she posts it. So make sure to go over there and check out her version of this same reference photo. I hope that you enjoyed listening to me talk about the process a little bit and to learn a little bit more about this project, which I had no idea existed before Rose Lynn Draws shared it with me. So I hope you learned something today about a new project in Spain, and I hope you'll join me in the next video. Just make sure to subscribe so I can let you know when the next video is up. Thanks for watching.